The first sensation he registered was the gentle hum, not unpleasant but unfamiliar, vibrating through the soles of his feet as if the floor itself had decided to greet him personally. His eyes fluttered open to a ceiling that shifted in color like liquid opal, light pooling in soft waves that moved across the room as though it had a heartbeat of its own. His head throbbed, an odd combination of confusion, mild panic, and a sense that something ridiculous was about to happen, which it promptly did, because the first thing he noticed wasn't the room, or the light, or the subtle whiff of ozone and something sweetly metallic in the air. It was that two figures were sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at him like he was the surprise in some cosmic joke. He blinked, twice, thrice, and then on the fourth attempt, which he considered overly cautious but necessary, he managed to register what he was seeing. One of them was a woman, impossibly elegant in the sort of way that humans sometimes ascribe to statues in museums, but rarely, if ever, manage to pull off in real life. She had the shape and proportions of a human female, skin that gleamed faintly like pale copper polished just enough to catch the light, eyes that seemed to flicker with a private joke at his expense, and long ears that extended gracefully upward and outward, a subtle curve that gave her an otherworldly elegance, and a hint that she could probably hear the sound of a hummingbird's wings from across the city, or maybe the galaxy. Next to her, sitting a little awkwardly on a stool that seemed far too small for her body, was a young girl who appeared to be her daughter. She had the same elongated ears, smaller and more delicate, her eyes wide and bright with curiosity that bordered on audacious, like someone who had read all the rules of human behavior and found them entirely too slow. The daughter's small hands fiddled with the edge of the bed, and when she noticed him noticing her, she gave a half-smile, one that felt like it contained the weight of someone who already knew he was going to make a fool of himself. The human's first thought, a perfectly rational thought in the universe of people who wake up beside aliens without prior consent, was, "I need coffee." His second thought, which he considered less rational but more polite to voice aloud, was, "Don't panic, don't panic. Maybe they're friendly. Maybe they brought breakfast. Maybe," he trailed off, realizing he had no idea what the standard etiquette was for waking up to a human-shaped alien with long ears and an uncanny knack for judging your posture from a mile away. He attempted a slow, measured blink, hoping to buy time while his brain scrambled for a plausible opening line. "Where am I?" he finally managed, in a voice that came out somewhere between gravel and a croak. The daughter snickered, a soft, melodic sound like wind chimes tangled in starlight, and the mother's lips curved upward in a smile that was not quite condescending, but certainly amused. "You are awake," the woman said, her voice smooth and melodic, carrying a rhythm that made every word feel like it had been carefully rehearsed for an interstellar performance. Good. Her English was impeccable, which either meant she had studied Earth languages extensively, or that she had access to technology that made learning 5,000 dialects in a week seem reasonable. He decided to hedge his bets and assume both. Good," he said, a little uncertain if that was the correct response to an alien suddenly deciding you are ready to be awake. He paused, trying to make small talk. I guess, good." The girl giggled again, louder this time, and he noticed her small teeth were perfectly aligned. Almost unnaturally so, but then, that was probably genetics or cosmic intervention. The woman tilted her head, ears twitching ever so slightly, a movement that felt like it could convey approval, curiosity, or mild irritation. "You are amusing," she said finally, and he was struck by the fact that whatever judgment had been passed, it was delivered with kindness. "Do not worry, you are not in danger." This was not, he realized with a grim sort of humor, a complete relief. It was the kind of statement that implied danger could be lurking at literally any other moment. He attempted a dry laugh which came out more like a cough and promptly decided to ignore it. "That's good to know," he said. "Not dangerous, got it. Safety first. I'm all about safety." He waved vaguely at the ceiling, which shifted in response with a gentle ripple of lavender and silver light, as though the room itself had been eavesdropping on his inner monologue and thought, "Yes, let's amuse the human further." The daughter leaned forward, tilting her head, ears pointing just slightly more forward now. "Do you always wake up like this?" she asked, voice curious but carrying a subtle undertone of mischief. He nearly choked on his own throat at the implication. "Like what?" he asked, trying to appear casual while simultaneously considering every possible embarrassing scenario. "Like this, in strange rooms, with strange women and their daughters." She giggled, and the sound was like sunlight spilling through crystal. "Not often," she said, then added quickly, "maybe once in your lifetime, probably less." He made a face. "Great, fantastic. One in a lifetime. That's reassuring." The woman, her ears flicking with the faintest twitch of amusement, reached forward and placed a hand on the edge of the bed. "You will learn," she said softly, "that our ways are sometimes abrupt, sometimes unusual, but always interesting." He blinked at her, and the room seemed to hum in agreement, lights shifting into warmer tones as if nodding along to her words. He tried to stand, wobbling like a newborn deer, and immediately regretted the decision, teetering precariously until the daughter reached out a hand and steadied him. "Careful," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Gravity is different here. Your legs may have forgotten how to behave." He managed a shaky laugh. "Gravity forgot me a long time ago," he admitted. "Also, apparently, my balance." The daughter snorted softly at this, hiding her laughter behind her small hands, and the mother's smile widened, ears twitching like a contented cat. Then, as if on cue, the room shifted subtly again. Holographic panels rose from the floor, projecting soft blue maps of stars, planets, and blinking points that might have been satellites, or sentient machines. But the human didn't have time to ponder, because the daughter poked at one, and it burst into a cascade of floating lights that made him look like a disco ball stuck in zero gravity. He raised his hands helplessly. I'm not ready for this," he said, voice tinged with awe and panic, though mostly awe. "You are always ready," the mother said, a teasing lilt in her voice. "You just do not know it yet." Her ears flicked again, and he was reminded of every cat he had ever owned and their uncanny ability to know when he was about to embarrass himself. By the time he sat back down, exhausted, fascinated, and still wondering whether he should apologize for waking up in this situation, the daughter leaned against her mother, humming a tune that seemed both alien and familiar, and the mother's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. No more words were necessary. Somehow, in this absurd, luminous room, amid floating lights, teasing glances, and the faint pulse of the building itself, he understood that a connection had been made, fragile and unexpected, but real. And somehow he couldn't stop smiling, even as he muttered to himself, half in fear and half in delight, "Well, this is going to be one hell of a morning." The room pulsed gently around them, and in that moment, human and alien shared a quiet laugh, a soft acknowledgement that the universe was far bigger, far stranger, and far funnier than he had ever given it credit for. By the time the human managed to stand without wobbling like a newborn on a trampoline, the room had begun to shift again, though subtly, almost imperceptibly. Panels slid into place along the walls, revealing not only displays of constellations, but a gentle cascade of alien script, flowing in loops and curls that seemed to float a fraction above the surface, almost teasing him to read it. He squinted at one of the panels, muttering, "I don't even read my own handwriting, let alone whatever this is." The daughter leaned over, peering at his face with obvious delight. "It's not meant to be read by humans," she said lightly, her ears flicking in a rhythm that almost looked like a secret code. "Mostly it's decoration, but some parts tell stories." "Stories?" he echoed, adjusting the collar of a shirt he wasn't sure he remembered putting on, though it turned out the room had outfitted him in soft, flowing clothes that didn't restrict movement. "Stories, like bedtime stories." The daughter nodded solemnly, and the mother's long ears twitched upward in a smile. Bedtime stories of entire star systems, she corrected, voice rich and musical. Sometimes humor, sometimes danger, sometimes lessons humans might not yet understand. The human scratched his head, feeling the creeping onset of existential vertigo combined with amusement. So, like a sci-fi bedtime story marathon for the slightly terrified. He asked, and both mother and daughter chuckled, the sound light enough to lift some of his lingering tension. Exactly, said the woman. Except there is no remote, and the story tends to involve you. He gulped, glancing at the daughter, who seemed to find this utterly hilarious. She bounced slightly on her stool. Don't worry, she said quickly. You mostly do fine, except that time you sneezed in zero gravity. That was impressive. He froze, horrified. Sneeze in zero gravity. His hands instinctively waved, imagining catastrophic consequences of floating snot and panicked airborne debris. The daughter only laughed harder, and the woman leaned forward, placing a calm, steadying hand on the human's arm. We survived, she said. You survived. A small victory for everyone. He exhaled in relief, though internally he swore he would never, ever sneeze again. Noted. Zero gravity, no sneezing, got it. The alien woman rose gracefully, her ears swaying subtly with each movement, and gestured toward a series of softly glowing platforms that floated slightly above the floor. Walk with us, she said. We will show you more. There is much to explore, and the sooner you become comfortable with the nuances, the easier your stay will be. As he moved, carefully, across the floating platforms, he noticed the subtle hum beneath his feet was changing in pitch and intensity, almost as though the floor was singing. Is the floor singing? He asked. The daughter nodded enthusiastically. Only slightly, she said. Mostly it hums at you if you step wrong or if you tell bad jokes. The human looked down at himself, mildly offended. I haven't told any bad jokes yet. The mother's eyes twinkled. That is because the universe is patient, she said, and it waits for the right moment. They reached a wall where a series of holographic orbs floated in midair. Each one contained a miniature scene. A bustling city with flying vehicles, a barren planet with crystalline spires, and a swirling nebula that seemed to pulse with an almost imperceptible heartbeat. The daughter poked one and it expanded, filling half the room with a dazzling projection of alien landscapes. Try one, she urged. The human hesitated, then reached out, and instantly the room was filled with holographic creatures, long-legged, multi-eyed beings, moving in ways that defied human biomechanics. He stumbled back, narrowly catching himself on the edge of a platform. I'm fine, he shouted, though his voice was tinged with awe. The daughter clapped her hands. You're not fine, but that's the point, she said gleefully. The human pinched the bridge of his nose. Point taken, he muttered. The mother laughed softly, and the floor hummed in agreement, almost in rhythm with her voice. You adapt quickly, she said, ears flicking in a way that reminded him of a cat satisfied with a well-placed pat. Or at least, you survive the chaos with style. The human chuckled, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease despite the absurdity surrounding him. Chaos with style, got it. I'll add it to my resume. The daughter giggled, bouncing slightly as her mother guided him to a small table hovering midair, set with objects that defied easy categorization. One seemed to be a puzzle that reconfigured itself when touched. Another emitted soft, melodic tones when tapped in a particular sequence. We use these, said the mother, to teach patience, observation, and occasionally humility. He picked up the puzzle with tentative fingers. As it twisted and shifted, lights and patterns emerging and dissolving in moments too quick for human comprehension, he made a joke, partly to mask his growing sense of inadequacy. I always wanted to be humbled by an alien puzzle. Check off that bucket list. The daughter laughed again, and even the mother's ears twitched in amusement. You have a sense of humor, she said. It will serve you well. Hours seemed to pass, or perhaps minutes. The concept of time was slippery here. The human moved from one floating platform to another, exploring holographic flora, interacting with miniaturized alien wildlife that hopped from projection to projection, and occasionally tripping over his own legs despite the generous spacing. Each minor stumble was met with soft laughter rather than irritation, a rhythm of gentle correction and amusement that felt almost like a dance. The daughter insisted on teaching him how to walk with grace, demonstrating elaborate poses that made him feel like an uncoordinated giraffe attempting ballet. At one point, the human leaned against a glowing column, catching his breath. "I have to say," he admitted, "this is the most exhausting day I've ever had, and it's barely begun." The daughter snorted. "It's only the first cycle," she said. "And cycles are better than your Earth days. Less tedious, more exciting. Also, the puzzles multiply if you ignore them." He raised an eyebrow. "Multiply?" She nodded solemnly. "Trust me." The mother moved closer, resting a hand lightly on his arm. "Do not worry," she said softly. "You will learn, you will laugh. You will stumble perhaps more than once, but always you will survive. And perhaps you will enjoy it." Her long ears twitched once, twice, like punctuation in a sentence, and he found himself smiling despite the lingering apprehension. There was warmth here, subtle but undeniable, beneath the humor, beneath the chaos, beneath the occasional panicked stumble. By the end of what he could only approximate as the morning, though time had little meaning, the three of them sat together on one of the larger floating platforms. Holographic stars swirled lazily around them, and a soft, warm hum filled the space, vibrating gently in rhythm with the mother's breathing. The daughter leaned against her mother, who, in turn, rested a hand on his knee. There was no need for words. The absurdity, the laughter, the minor disasters and lessons, they had all built something more substantial, fragile yet real, a connection. He exhaled slowly, finally allowing himself to relax, and muttered under his breath, This isn't so bad. Actually, it's kind of incredible." The daughter peeked at him, a mischievous grin on her small face. "You're supposed to say something profound," she teased. The human chuckled. "Profound? I'll leave that to you two cosmic geniuses." The mother's ears twitched in a final, approving gesture, the room's lights dimming slightly as though in agreement. The human realized then that he had begun to understand the rhythm of this strange new world. Curiosity, humor, patience, and the quiet reassurance that even in chaos, companionship was possible. And somehow, against every expectation, it was comfortable. More than comfortable, it was the first time in a long while that he had felt that maybe, just maybe, the universe had a sense of humor, and that he was part of the joke. The day began softly, without the sudden hums or floating panels of previous cycles. The human woke to a warm, gentle light that seemed to embrace him rather than challenge him, as if the room had finally decided he was worth a break. He stretched, still awkwardly, still a little stiff from his minor misadventures with floating orbs and self-writing holograms, and noticed the alien woman and her daughter seated quietly at the edge of the platform, waiting. Neither spoke immediately, just watched, and for the first time he felt no panic, no urgent need to assess threat levels. Instead, there was a quiet, almost tender anticipation, and he realized with a wry, half-amused thought that he had come to enjoy this sort of thing. "You're awake," the woman said at last, her voice low and melodic, ears flicking subtly, a punctuation of their rhythmless yet somehow meaningful language. She leaned back, relaxed, the sort of ease that came from someone who had mastered patience over centuries, perhaps. "Good, today we will explore together. Not puzzles, not accidental disasters, just understanding." The human blinked. Understanding, his inner monologue chimed in. "Oh no. This is the part where she tells you the universe will eat you alive if you don't align your quantum signature with the nearest nebula." But instead, she smiled, a small, teasing curl of her lips that reminded him, impossibly, of both sunlight and fine silk. The daughter grinned too, perched delicately on the edge of the platform, ears pointing forward in curiosity. "No disasters," she added. "Mostly." They moved as a group across the room, or rather, across the floating platforms that had gradually become familiar territory. Each step was confident, the human finding his balance with an ease that had been absent just a cycle ago. He glanced at the mother, whose long ears twitched rhythmically, and for the first time realized that he could, subtly, read her expressions. A flicker, a twitch, a barely perceptible shift in posture. It was language, he thought, and he could understand it. The daughter laughed softly at his expression, delighted at his newfound perceptiveness. The mother gestured to a large, circular console hovering in midair, projecting a three-dimensional map of their sector of space. Stars twinkled, planets rotated slowly, and comets traced luminous arcs across the void. "This is our home system," she said. "We want you to understand it as much as you can, not for study, not for survival, but for connection. You have learned to laugh with us. Now you will learn to see what we see." He leaned forward, tracing his fingers along the edge of the console, and noticed how the daughter's small hands mimicked his movements. Humor bubbled up almost involuntarily. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "I've survived zero-gravity sneezes, floating disco bubbles, self-replicating puzzles, and somehow, you're telling me the hardest part is understanding the stars." The daughter snorted, ears twitching, and the mother let out a soft, melodious laugh. "Humor will carry you further than fear," she said, "but you may still trip occasionally. That is unavoidable." He rolled his eyes good-naturedly, feeling the warmth of their gentle teasing. He had noticed, over cycles of light and floating platforms, that humor had become more than a defense mechanism. It had become a bridge, a language that transcended species and circumstance. He had stumbled often, yes, but each fall, each misstep had been met with laughter, guidance, and, unexpectedly, patience. He realized he had changed. He was lighter, more willing to embrace the unknown, more capable of finding wonder instead of panic in chaos. The mother guided them to another part of the room, a soft, bioluminescent garden that seemed to pulse in tandem with the room's gentle hum. Plants glowed in colors humans had no names for, and delicate tendrils waved as if recognizing their presence. The daughter darted forward, exploring, touching the luminescent petals, and humming a tune that made the air vibrate softly. The human followed more cautiously, letting his hand brush against one of the glowing stems, feeling the pulse of life beneath his fingers. "You understand more than you think," the woman said softly, walking beside him. "You read gestures, you sense intention, you navigate spaces that were once foreign. You have adapted." She paused, and he noticed the small smile that tugged at the corner of her lips, subtle and proud. "And you have laughed. That is rare in our experience." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've had exceptional teachers," he said. "Though mostly I think I've been lucky. Or maybe the universe has a sense of humor." Both mother and daughter laughed, and the sound rippled gently through the garden, harmonizing with the subtle pulse of bioluminescence. The daughter tugged on his hand, dragging him to a shallow pool of liquid light that reflected not only their images but subtle distortions, echoes of distant stars. "Look," she said, "everything is connected, even us." He stared, fascinated, and realized she was right. The reflections shifted as they moved, showing connections he hadn't noticed before. Constellations overlapping like invisible threads, stars pulsing with shared rhythm, a subtle web of energy that linked not only the garden, not only the room, but perhaps even their lives together. He knelt beside the pool, watching the reflections ripple under his fingertips. Humor, he thought, had led him here. Laughter, patience, curiosity, they were the real tools of understanding. Not technology, not prowess, not force. Just connection. And in that reflection he glimpsed the essence of the bond he had formed with them, fragile, luminous, yet undeniably real. The mother crouched beside him, placing her hand lightly over his. Her long ears twitched once, twice, a silent punctuation as if emphasizing something beyond words. "You are part of our world now," she said. "Not fully human, not fully ours, but connected. And that is enough." The daughter leaned in, resting her head against his shoulder with a small sigh of contentment. "You belong," she said simply. And it was true. He could feel it in the soft hum of the room, the pulsing of the garden, the gentle rhythm of their laughter. Belonging was no longer a distant, fragile concept. It was here now, in the quiet acceptance and warmth of beings so unlike yet so familiar. He looked at them, at their delicate, luminous features and long, expressive ears, at the small hand clutching his arm, and realized that the fear he had carried when he first woke had transformed entirely. He was no longer a visitor, no longer an observer stumbling through alien puzzles and floating platforms. He was a participant, a companion, a part of a strange and beautiful rhythm that spanned species, galaxies, and experiences he had never dreamed of. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked lightly, curiosity breaking through the reverence of the moment. "Sometimes," said the daughter, "but never of learning or laughing." "Or living," added the mother, her voice calm and full of warmth. "We are not meant to simply exist. We are meant to connect, to explore, and to find joy where we can. You understand that now?" He nodded slowly, smiling despite himself. "I think I do, more than I thought possible. And honestly, I've loved every ridiculous, terrifying, and sometimes humiliating minute of it." The daughter snickered, "Even when you sneezed." "Especially then," he admitted, laughing. "Especially then." For a long moment, they sat together beside the pool of liquid light, watching reflections of distant stars ripple and dance. Humor, trust, patience, and curiosity had brought them here, binding three lives across the boundaries of species and experience. The room's gentle hum seemed to nod in agreement, as if the universe itself acknowledged the fragile, luminous bond they had forged. As the cycle of light shifted once more, he realized that he had changed. He had arrived as a cautious,